If you're going to be rocking the Sega 32X on top of your Sega Genesis with games like Cosmic Carnage, the standard 3-button Sega Genesis controller may not cut it, even though this is possibly the greatest video game controller ever made. It's 3 buttons too little to play Cosmic Carnage. You need a 6-button Sega controller. There's numerous Sega Genesis 6-button controllers out there to choose from, like this one, which I've previously reviewed, the Sega 6-button model MK-1470. This is the model MK-1470, which is even smaller than this one. But it has a larger row of buttons on the bottom, possibly for greater comfort, possibly just to look interesting. It also has turbo and slow, as well as a mode button and a start button, which is blue. But you won't be blue when playing this. These may look nearly identical, but take a close-up look and you'll see they have different body styling, which doesn't affect gameplay at all. I'm just mentioning it because it's there. Also, the D-pad on this one is elevated slightly more than the D-pad on the 1653. That's astounding. With so many Sega Genesis controllers to choose from, which one is the one for you? Well, it depends if you like a larger controller or a smaller controller, if you want 6 buttons or 3 buttons. Do you want turbo? I don't know. I can't answer that for you. This is one of the smallest Sega controllers I've seen, yet it's very comfortable. Fits in my hands nicely. Standard, typical Sega Genesis style D-pad over here. Slightly textured plastic. Very comfortable design. I like the larger A, B, and C buttons. When you're playing a game like Cosmic Carnage, which is a fighting game, you want to be able to tell right away what you're doing. Punching, kicking, using your mutant tail to rip people's heads off. Larger buttons versus smaller buttons help you do that. Little selector switch here for turbo and slow. This one has been QC passed by 4, and it's made in China. I don't particularly care for the coloring on it, and this is starting to get a little complicated. They really got away from the sleek, smooth design of the original one with these other kind of, I don't know, spaceship-looking plastic ovals and stuff on here. Starting to look a bit like a Sega Saturn controller. Let's take a close-up look at these buttons here. You see that they're labeled A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, which many of the 32X Sega CD and later Sega Genesis games used. There's that slight texture on the D-pad, textured plastic shell except for the reflective part up here. All in all, it's not one of their best looking gamepads, one of their best looking controllers, but still very solid. Typical high Sega build quality, and it works well. That's what's important. The model MK-1740. Let's make sure I actually read that right. 1470. That's what I meant. The model MK-1470. The 1740 is the one with the chainsaw on the front of it. Yeah, you can't just get that anywhere. This was donated to Classic Game Room by Frank in California, along with the Sega 32X and a bunch of games. So thank you, Frank. And just to clarify to everybody, you don't need a 32X to use this 6-button controller or any other 6-button controller. They will work just fine for Sega Genesis games that require 3 buttons. In fact, this thing will even work on your Atari 2600. It'll just use 1 button.